I was thinking this the other day. It's funny how in most industries, most sports, the biggest stars are always paid the most, right?
Right.
I know most chefs that I know that have worked in 3 Michelin star kitchens, they're not earning that much money, Brian. So it's quite a funny thing where an industry that, it's so proud of that high achievement, but it's not rewarded by it. The industry needs desperately a change. Technology, it's a tool and it can really help change certain things, but I think maybe the main issue within the restaurant industry in some occasions it's leadership, and I think the issue always lies in systems in restaurants.
Everyone says the problems in kitchen is people. But what if the real problem is the system? You're listening to Fugitive Chefs, a podcast about what happens when chefs step outside the traditional kitchen path. I'm Furkan. I've worked in kitchens like Noma and Mugaritz, and today I work outside restaurants as a senior innovation chef, currently at Kraft Heinz. Most conversations about change in the industry focus on chefs. But today's episode flips that. Today I'm speaking with Yago Ferretti. Yago started in kitchens, working alongside chefs like Massimo Bottura and Davis Munoz. But instead of continuing that path, he stepped into entrepreneurship. Now he's building the FoodWeb and working on something he calls ROA, Restaurant Operations Assistant, a system designed to reduce the operational chaos that burns chefs out. Hello, Yago. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. And I was just telling you before we started recording that it's very interesting for me to have entrepreneurs always because, of course, there are a lot of ways, and we've had around 70 episodes now with chefs doing things outside the kitchen. But for me, entrepreneurship specifically is interesting because to a certain extent, you can fix the kind of values you want to associate with, what kind of a challenge you want to have. Of course, that freedom comes with its own turbulences and problems that you have to deal with as an entrepreneur. But I think it's very interesting to have entrepreneurs on the podcast. So before we start into what you're doing today, tell us about your time in kitchens, because you worked with some amazing chefs, some great restaurants. What did you experience over there that sort of made you transition into what you do today? Tell us about that.
Well, I think it all began on why I started cooking in a way. I stumbled into cooking, to be honest, when I was 16 years old. And it was quite organically, right? But I never envisioned myself perhaps my whole life inside of a kitchen. So I guess when I started stepping into kitchens, I was just seeing where it led me with no perhaps intent to spend my whole life in that say context, right? Just because I was very curious, I had this deep passion on food cooking, and I actually remember when I was in culinary school, I decided like the restaurant I chose to go on and do my stage was Trixa, right? And the culinary school told me like it's a tough restaurant to go to, and I told them, and I understand, but in the end I think I really want to discover whether if this is actually a passion that I have or just something that I like doing, right? Because I sort of the calculation in my head that if I survive a tough environment where things are done a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
it means that I don't know that I actually like it, and it turned out that I actually liked it quite a bit, even with the mishaps and the shortcomings that the kitchen world has sometimes. It's in itself a very beautiful place. So I think, to be honest, in many ways, that sort of love for cooking, and in the end, the just that feeling you get when you're in service and when you're serving crazy food to people and they have that genuine reaction of just joy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what made me stay for longer than I expected, for sure. And I guess as you said, right, just the part of me that wanted to be an entrepreneur, which is in the first place how I got into cooking, just started coming out very, very sort of aggressively, if you like, once I started to see, the issues within the system of the cooking industry.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that you said something, right? It's a tough industry, and people tell you about specific places how tough it can be to work in them, and then you stepping inside and seeing that because as I understand from you, when you enter the business, you already had an inclination to be entrepreneurial at some stage, and I feel kitchens are great places for that because I think every business has its own problems, and that those problems then create solutions, and those solutions end up being businesses. But I feel just for the pace of the environment it is, or the way, the amount of human interaction in it, and different pieces of the puzzle, how they all have to work in sync to make this work, I feel there's even more room than any other industry to find these problems and solutions, right? So for you, when you look at that as a monster, the whole industry, do you think, at least the kitchen side of things, that let's leave front of house, for us as the chef side of things, what do you think makes it tough? Facts that you have to work weekends, or it's hot inside a kitchen, or there is a sort of physical hazard of working with, say, machines? That is a physical aspect of what makes it tough. And then there is the system side of it, which is shouldn't be tough, but it's just tough because we have not adopted systems that work better. So how much, what proportion do you think of this toughness comes from systems and comes from reality of just how kitchens are, you know?
Wow, I think that question itself could be a whole podcast, to be
Yeah.
honest. Because there's like we could break it down in so many different ways, right? But
Mhm.
so let's say I would say that system wise, and let's say just business logic in the way, right? In the
Mhm.
sense of what a restaurant is and what a restaurant is supposed to do, serve food. Perfect. Then we have different degrees of what serving food means. Have let's not call it like high cuisine. Let's just call it sort of more vanguard cuisine, right? Which is just really means that it's more elaborated, more detailed in a very specific sort of way, right? But in this the spectrum of the industry, we need to understand that there's different types of restaurants, and each restaurant has a different necessity, right? But in the end, if we break it down to the minimals of levels, it's just food being processed in different ways for slightly different purposes, right? And that needs a certain sort of input, right? And for sure, in restaurants of lower complexity, when we talk about restaurants of lower complexity, in my opinion, we talk about those restaurants that don't have too many components to the dishes, and the components that are there, they're not too technically advanced, and they're more easier to standardize than to do in sort of bigger bulks, and you don't need that much of a expert team to be able to actually go through them in a way. But in the restaurants where you do have more levels of complexity, and where you do have more preparations, when we start going to the high end, to the vanguard type thing, then the system really, really plays a role, because then we're talking about really high complexities, really high components that people have to take into account, right? So the first thing is doing this differentiation that there's systems within restaurants that are simpler than others, and therefore in some cases, some do really, really sort of build up to being a big part of the issue itself, because of the complexity. And also the complexity comes, I guess, also with the fact that it's just so difficult to always see everything that needs to happen in a restaurant, right? And that sort of opaqueness, it's what creates the anxiety in the end. I would attribute, and just also because how I'm sort of biased in a way, I think systems in many ways are the ways to fix things. And I think the issue always lies in systems in restaurants, because in the end, the culture that comes out, the accidents that happens are all built upon the systems that you have in place in your restaurants, in your business. Because as as much of a craft that cooking is, once you do it in a restaurant, apart from a craft and an art, it's a business. And if you have a team, and in the end, we don't need to forget that the main point of the restaurant is to process food, serve food, and depending on the level of the restaurant, they do it more in as an art form, if you will. And in other cases, it's more direct in a way, right?
Yeah.
But it all lies down into the
In the
system
systems,
and
yeah.
how.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, and it's also interesting what you say about how there is no one size fits all, and there are these very clear two distinctions of places which are just there to deliver, like your daily restaurants where you're just getting the purpose is more food, and then the more experiential settings where the focus is more the experience, and of course that experience comes at a cost of more elaborate preparations. But again, within them there is so many subsets, which I think also makes it a little complicated, because building a product which has to sort of, I mean, if the product can be a plug and play, the more chances it'll look less like a consultancy and look more like a product, like a proper business. And I feel that's where a lot of challenge lies. But for you, before we I think get deeper into this, because it's going to be a very interesting conversation to understand what kind of people you're facing, what are the challenges you're seeing, how is your solution answering those problems. Tell us about FoodWeb, or also the restaurant operation assistant that you've created. Tell us about it. What does it do? And who is this tool for?
Okay, so I mean, really, this ROA, which is the name of our software, right? The restaurant operation assistant, ROA. It's born from this complexity, from the fact that in restaurants we have to operate with so many different things in our mind. And I recently saw a post that was very self-explanatory on the restaurant life, all of the timers that chefs have to take into account when they're
Yeah.
the moment they step into a kitchen. And what we want to do with ROA, the main goal here is to reduce that noise inside a chef's head, and to give them a tool that actually allows them to visualize the important things of their daily operations, which in essence are the things that they have to do, their prep tasks and their order lists and understanding their inventory in real time, right? So that's the main core of RAW. RAW, it's a tool that allows you to visualize everything that's going on in your kitchen. Whether you are a head chef, a chef de partie, for all we care in RAW, you could even be a stagiaire, just a newly entered person into a kitchen. Why? Because in the end, it's important for you to know your recipes and to know what you need to do tomorrow, right? Because if imagine how more powerful it would be to bring people into the kitchen that the day before they had access to exactly the recipes that they're going to be touching and exactly the preparations that they're going to be touching, and already organized. This week you're going to do these three things, and these four other things. The whole communication pipeline in the kitchen already starts to get better. And here is the importance of systems, right? In many occasions, people start to, the pressure starts to build because there's no proper communication channels. There's way too many opaque zones within a kitchen. And ROA, what it does, it shines light to them by creating a very simple system to use. You can literally interact with ROA, which is a little AI robot where that
Mm-hmm.
go around the app and interact with the app however where one wants. Sort of make sure that there's real value in all of this. We connect to your POS system to track your demand on the dot, which means that all of the production plans that the raw plans out for you are based exactly on the demand. This is very beneficial because a soup doesn't sell the same in January that it does in May, right? So why would we produce exactly the same amount in January than in May? So what ROA does, it analyzes all of the demands to understand how much exactly to produce in any given point of the year, week, month, obviously. For example, is there an event next month in Madrid next to my restaurant? Oh, yes, there is. So there's a likelihood that more people will be coming. So let's perhaps prepare 10% more of these dishes that are more likely to,
Yeah, sell there. Yeah. Okay.
giving a lot of control to restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And with what's happening in the world right now, that's super important. Just touching upon what's happening on the Hormuz channel for the food industry, it's a critical moment. Food prices are gonna skyrocket in the coming months if things don't change. And even if things change, I think we're a bit too late not to
Mm-hmm.
get a big hit in the prices, right? Restaurants have to prepare, and they have to start being aware that apart from the craft, there's the business aspect, and the better systems you put in place to ease the minds of your chefs, the better the culture inside the kitchen, the atmosphere inside the kitchen will be.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting, Yago. And what also arises in my head when I listen to your experience of coming, like ending up creating this technology and this tool that could be something very useful for chefs. My question to myself is: say we go a few years before, or like we think about other chefs who have possibly come up with similar problems. In the innate quality of a chef or the way they grow up is to think they have to go to a culinary school, become a chef, grow the ranks, possibly own a restaurant in the future, and then do everything better than what they saw was being done. So my question to you over here is: what made you believe that the solution lies in tech, and why did you look at tech rather than saying, you know what, I'm seeing these problems in a said restaurant and I know I can do it better, so I'll just start a restaurant where I'll do it better? Why the inclination to go towards tech and going outside the kitchen to parallelly create something that helps what's happening inside?
Well, I guess that one side of me was always wanting to sort of be entrepreneurial in a scale up type way. In the end, restaurants, beautiful business, very hard business, and very hard to scale. It's not very forgiving, the restaurant
Yeah,
business, right? And running a restaurant, it's very hard. Not that running a tech company, it's not, but it's definitely easier to scale.
definitely.
And I don't know, I had the right people by my side when the first idea of Raw came to mind, which is my best one of my best friends, Arnav Agarwal, who's my co-founder, and he's crazy guy. He has a bachelor's in applied physics, no, theoretical physics, sorry. And discussing the idea with it, the problems of the kitchen with him, my mind started coming around that, with the new technologies around and whatnot, we could build a system that's flexible enough to understand the operations of a restaurant. Nevertheless, I don't think that technology by itself will solve the current issues that we have in the restaurant business. Technology, it's a tool and it can really help change certain things, but I think the maybe the main issue within the restaurant industry, in some occasions, not always, obviously, it's leadership. In the sense, I've had the pleasure to have both. Well, the pleasure. I've had the chance, if you may, to have both type of leaders, the really good ones and the not so great ones. I think that's where the biggest sort of change has to happen. In the end, digitalization will come with time, right? There's a new generation of chefs coming, much more technologically savvy and used to, using their phones and whatnot. So I'm sure that the industry will adapt itself and adopt the technologies that are useful. And that's very important, because it is true that chefs don't really see a lot of the tech around as an investment. They see it as an spending, because it is true that sometimes it doesn't really provide the value necessary. And that's what one of the also things that prompt me to start this, to find the solution through software. Because doing discovery with a lot of chefs, we sort of understood that a lot of times they were digitalizing the errors in the system, if that makes any sort of sense,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
instead of finding ways to patch up to actually use technology to sort of solve for those mistakes, right? So although technology is a super useful tool, leadership, it's what we need.
Yeah,
Much
yeah.
better leadership.
No, definitely. And I totally agree with it. I think there's things about restaurant systems or kitchen systems that you can fix with technology. But then again, there is a whole system and layer of soft skills and people management and things like that, which I think, yes, AI or technology cannot solve it, but technology then makes your time spent on other things so efficient that you have more time to dedicate them to people management, recruitment, one-on-ones with your teammates,
Definitely.
and building a better culture. So I think it's not directly solving the problem, but it's creating space to be able to speak about those problems, I feel. And that's where my question to you also is that everyone's talking about AI right now. I think not so much in the kitchen yet, which should be more. I working in a corporate environment. Of course, we have platforms and trainings about them, ways to work, to not use external AI, but use the AI agents or platforms that we have created. And I see that within that also there's a lot of friction, even though I work with chefs who are, say, more digital native because they work in a corporate environment. How are you seeing this friction or not friction in the kitchen industry? How welcomed are these technologies from chefs? I guess there's different answers to all of this, but in general, what do you think are kitchen environments most struggling with when you introduce them a technology? Does it get welcomed easily, or people are still kind of skeptical about what this technology is going to do, or technology at large is going to do for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think chefs are quite skeptical
Yeah.
about technology, AI, and the whole sort of atmosphere. As I said before, most chefs, for example, here in Spain, but maybe in the US, this is not
Mhm.
so much true. But the rest of the world, I would say most chefs, most restaurants don't see investing in technology as an investment. They see it as an expenditure, because their ROI, it's not clear, right?
Right.
In their defense, it's quite difficult to track ROI on a software in a kitchen or in a restaurant, right? And I also think that a lot of the friction has been caused by over complex tools that didn't perhaps help the chefs in the ways that help the chef needed help. And also, we need to understand that the kitchens, they are very special context. Like, it's a very high pressure environment where time, it's the least available resource, and any minute that a chef is using their hands for something else that is not cooking, or
Mm-hmm.
doing something that's sort of let's say implemented in the system, this means checking their inventory, going to see their orders, you know what I mean? Every moment that a chef is not doing that, unless the tool helps them solve in a very clear way something that they immediately see the value, it's very hard for them to adopt. And learning curves inside of the kitchen can literally kill a piece of technology in a kitchen, in the sense, let's just think about ovens for a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have Rational, we have other brands, but just Rational as an example. They have the most sophisticated ovens perhaps of the industry. You can do crazy things with those ovens. You can set them up, and in certain ways for service to maintain certain, temperatures and whatnot, right? But how often do those ovens actually get used in the most efficient way? Most never, because the time that it takes for a chef to learn how to set it up, it's way too long, and
Yeah.
chefs don't do it. I was literally talking to someone the other day from another brand that they see like the way their ovens are being sort of used, and
Mm-hmm.
95 for them, 80% of the time or 90% of the time run in continuous 180, 50-50 humidity. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, like the kitchen industry has adopted a lot of technology because we have from sous vide, vacuum packers, and other types. But in digital technology, we've been running away. But
Mm.
nevertheless, I think AI is here to change the game. Because AI, for the first time, is able to make the chef not have to learn how to use a piece of software. I mean, maybe this is a bit too much, but in a way, if you use AI way well, I think AI can literally can allow you to do practically anything you want. In the sense, any hurdle that you have in the past, with AI, you can, break it down in many different ways that are easier for a user to then interact with. And
Right.
that's, I think, a key piece of the puzzle here. That right now we can use conversational AI to onboard the client. I don't need to spend an hour and a half talking to you,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't need 2 hours understanding where to touch to add a member of your kitchen, or where to add that, oh no, I do the orders only on Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
I always do them at 5 p.m. through WhatsApp, right? Instead of figuring out how to add all of that data into an app, now you can just use AI for that sort of process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which for me changes the game completely, because now again we can use softwares like ROA just to visualize the data, and you use ROA the agent just to make him change things around the app as
Yeah.
you need them to be changed, without you having to learn all of the details of
Mm.
how things have to work, right? Because in the end, your time, it's so much more valuable when it's spent cooking, when it's spent doing the thing you love and doing the thing that chefs are good at, which is cooking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you say about, like, because you mentioned yourself, there's a danger over here that many of these solutions promise too much and then fall on their face when it comes to real kitchen reality of things and how real all of this is. And as you said, voice is a layer which takes away. For example, if your hands are greasy or if you are working next to a fryer, so your voice command basically takes away those kind of frictions. But for you, some of these solutions, as you said, don't work in real kitchens. What makes you confident that this actually works in reality? In terms of ROA, I just would like to understand your testing grounds or guardrails that you're setting for yourself to understand and kind of make it so obvious within the daily use of a kitchen. What kind of a testing kind of parameter you have for building this tool?
I mean, just touching upon voice and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things, I think those are great ideas and can definitely work, but maybe not just right now. Kitchens are very noisy. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
True.
sometimes that sort of makes it a bit harder to work.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, I think as one of the core values that we have product wise is to be chef centric. We are building around chefs. So we've been building RUA block by block, right? And at every stage, we've put chefs in the center. We've asked chefs what they want, how, if they like this, if they didn't like this, and that's how we've been building. And now we're entering a quite a more aggressive phase in this side of things, where we're validating at a more sort of altitude cruise speed, looking for more restaurant. Again, the idea is always that we have weekly meetings with all of our clients to understand what things are good, what things are bad, and we immediately change the things that are bad and keep the things that are good, and continue iterating. And I think the most important thing, and also something that Lanzadera makes very clear, you need to fall in love with the problem, not with the solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
We really need to focus on the, and if tomorrow we wake up and we realize that chefs actually don't need all of this, they actually need only this, then we're scraping out all of that and using only this. Like, focus is the most important, and focusing on the problem and what the experts, which are our clients, want to see it solved. It's our main priority. So, and the beautiful thing again with AI is that we can go from idea to testing to implementation very, very fast,
Right.
right? And I think that's sort of an edge here, especially as a Sastrian company, where we don't have nothing. It's truly set, and we can
Mm-hmm.
change and adapt ourselves as ever we need, as ever we see fit, whenever we see fit. And also on the other side of things, we've been very lucky also to be just, to just, in my opinion, we've started working in this right when the wave of AI,
Yeah,
started.
it started. Yeah.
So I think if we play our cards well,
Hmm.
it's not an easy path, but
I bet.
but
It's super interesting, and I have a connected question with that. But before we go on to that, tell me a little about, tell very quickly the listeners about, because you and I know about Lanzadera, Y Combinator, Antler, all these accelerators, incubators. Tell about your experience of Lanzadera, what it is for somebody listening, because maybe it's somebody who's listening from Chile, and then he can look up, okay, I have this idea, maybe to connect with a co-founder or to look for funding or a platform. What is Lanzadera, and what is the idea of places like these?
funny. We should mention Chile because we actually have a Chilean startup in
Ah,
Lanzadera.
really? Okay.
Lanzadera, it's a startup accelerator. In this case, the owner is Juan Roch, which is the owner of Mercadona here in Spain. And startup accelerators are programs that startups can join. They're normally, you need to be accepted into them. So you do the whole form, and then you have an interview. And once you get accepted, they practically, in some cases, they can fund you. They can put money like Y Combinator, and then they accelerate you by putting you in a context, in an ecosystem with other funders and mentors. And all of those people are there to help you grow your business and get from point A to B, right? In the case of Lanzadera, you don't get funding, you don't get money. It is true they have an investment wing and you can get an investment, but it's hard, obviously. It's always hard to get investment. Yeah, they really help you get to point A to B, and they do it through a lot of mentors and mentees, also the ecosystem, obviously, and then by explaining or sort of teaching you what they call calidad total. And calidad total is the decision making framework that Mercadona uses to build their operations. So it's very interesting. It's very valuable, as you can imagine. We're getting taught a system that's used in a $50 billion company,
Yeah.
and giving us that insight at such an early stage gives us the ability to build systems very early on that will ensure scale up success.
Yeah, no, that's a super environment. I was telling before the call as well. I think it's a great environment, not just to speak to like food tech startups, but every startup, and just seeing the frictions they are having, the network they are having. I think building a food startup, although traditionally Spain is not the most entrepreneurial country in Europe, it's far from that. It's not the Stockholm, but I think in terms of food, it's done great for itself, and I feel this is the next step where, especially the policies I'm seeing coming out. I mean, you can be a supporter of the government or not, but I see the strategies coming out of Spain currently are very much towards going for that. It's a country very skilled with the artisanal side of things, and now how can you scale that up and make that accessible for people? I mean, Mercadona is an example of making things which are craft and artisanal accessible for a wider range of audience. But coming back to the question I had from you, because you said you are testing with chefs in the loop of the system, and that is your validation. I think that's a great approach, as per like lean innovation. You propose things and cut it out with the core people who will use it in the future. In those interactions, what do you think are the things that you are, or what do you see are the things you're observing, that tasks or things that chefs do that drain them the most but don't really give them the most in terms of business? What are these low hanging fruits that you were seeing from your observation of building a tech company?
Yeah, I mean, a few things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's sources of truth, to be honest.
Hmm.
When we talk about sources of truth, is the things that sort of make the business work. And in the case of restaurants, of kitchens, the recipe cows that we have in restaurants, like, let's talk about it. My God, the amount of restaurants that depend on books, personal books of people that have, written notes of their recipe. And when they change, there's a cross under a really tiny number, and so many times. And then also, again, talking about systems, right? Chefs that, chefs are people, they're busy, and especially chefs of bigger restaurant chains or restaurant groups that go from one side to the other. They change things on the fly, and perhaps their team is left hanging, and then there's not the proper communication. Just with the whole recipe flow, we have a main sort of issue, right? Because how can we operate if we don't have a proper way to understand what is the actual recipe here? And for example, today I was talking to a chef, and one of the main problems he has is that he directs a restaurant group, and he has tiramisu in in all of their 4 restaurants around Spain, or 5
Mhm.
restaurants. But every chef does it slightly different because they do it slightly different. So, for example, that's one of the main issues, right? And there's a lot of, especially a lot of waste in training the team in that sense, right? To be sort of standardized in their operations. And it's very hard because, again, systems, right? Then it depends. It depends on like each restaurant it's their own world. And I've seen restaurants that, for example, handle orders very well, quite efficiently. A software could do it better, yes, but they have their ways and it works well. But I've seen other restaurants, and it's a core part of their operations, right? Orders, a core part of their operations. But depending how you handle your orders, it can be such a time waste. Like I've also seen station masters, chefs de partie, doing their list, then all these pieces of paper get taken to the head chef or the sous chef, and then the sous chef starts writing to every sort of person, every supplier by hand. That's a massive waste of time. So it depends a lot in every restaurant where that sort of time to value distribution of a task comes. And again, as I love saying, um, it all depends on how they organize themselves. Because although some things are crucial for a restaurant, the way they handle them, they can be the downfall of the restaurant,
Yeah.
right? Especially with cost, if you're not handling your food cost, right? But that is quite relevant, and it's better to take your time as much as you want to, but making sure that things are sort of done in the more efficient way by making sure again that the right systems are in place and that people don't over engineer things in a way.
Yeah, and if we zoom out, Yago, and if we think about it, there is a product that you're creating, there are many products other people are creating, which are then again going on the point of sale side of things or the business side of things. Some are going into the kitchen like yours. Of course, there's a whole equipment and gadgets and machineries. All of these technologies advancing the way they are, and the way is just going to get more. I mean, we are seeing what's coming out of Clothropic every week, and we know it's going to somehow infect our industry as well, and there will be faster evolution, I think, in terms of technology. But with everything that's building and it works, what does the role of a chef look like in 10 years? Because very interestingly, you said, I think I like this point that you made, that chefs should dedicate more time to the craft rather than systems that are stopping them, like that are not leaving them free time to focus on the craft. And in 10 years, with all these tools working out, what do you think the role of a chef will look like?
I mean, I think it could go many different ways, to be honest. And we'll see restaurants change a lot. We'll see a lot of restaurants that don't use chefs anymore, for sure. But on the other side of the coin, I think we'll be a lot more creative, in the sense I think chefs will go a lot deeper into the whole creative side of things, because now the sky's the limit. Like we can try things at a much faster pace, and we don't need huge teams to do it, right? Maybe restaurants in the future don't need a whole brigade of 25 chefs to work. Maybe with software, the right amount of hardware in a kitchen, we can have small groups of chefs trying crazy things. So I'm an optimist by default. So I'd like to think that we'll see a lot more restaurants, a lot more chefs, a lot smaller teams, even not a bigger of dining sort of areas and holes. Everything a bit reduced, a lot more of it, a lot more independent sort of restaurant on chefs owners trying their own experiments, leveraging technology, AI, hardware, robotics. I mean, AI is super important, but within the restaurant industry, maybe even robotics comes into play, especially in the next 10 years. And I don't think we will get replaced because, again, cooking, it's an art form, in my opinion, because we, through the cook, through the through the food chefs cook, they're able to evoke feelings to other people, trigger memories, trigger sensations, and that's sort of a very intimate part of human connection, if you will. And I think robots can help us replicate dishes, but the memory of that, time that I was living in Italy and I bought that leek and I used it to cook that specific dish, that memory cannot be replaced by a robot, right? And
Right.
I'm creating a dish and I go back to that memory. And from there, I started elaborating and creating the tasting menu or whatever I'm creating. That's unique to the human experience. And in the end, chefs try to replicate the experiences that we've had through travels, even through emotions sometimes, through a dish. And that's the way sort of we express ourselves. And I'm a deep believer that technology, AI, and even robotics will help a lot more chefs express themselves a lot more freely and cost effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I believe, and I hope this all comes true. And it's, I mean, it's only logical. I feel we are in the right time, and as you said, you got this idea and this startup at the right time. And I feel a lot of these things, if align and if people are receptive about it, and that's where my next question is, because when you are now in this position that you've built something and you're testing it, trying it, including users' feedback into it, do you think in all these interactions when you go pitch this product to real consumers, and maybe not even the consumers but the customers who are the owners of the restaurant or groups of restaurants, do you think based on those conversations the industry actually wants to change? Maybe it's a tough question. Or are we just addicted to how it works right now? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think the industry, it's, I mean, with, especially with everything that has happened 2026, we've seen, and you've also talked about it with the whole Noma situation. We've seen, and we've been saying for a long time now, quite a desire for change. Even the industry itself, at least in Spain, it's so tough to find restaurant workers, people that were willing to go and work as a chefs, even in high-end restaurants, right? And let's not talk about front of the house. It's practically impossible to find someone. The industry needs desperately a change, and I think we're putting the grains of salt to actually make the change, right? It's going to be slow, but also in the last 50 years a lot has changed and more work has to be done. But I think the new generation coming, I think they will do well in that regard. I don't know, I'm quite I'm quite biased and being positive, but I just think it's necessary, because in the end, I was thinking this the other day. It's funny how in most industries, most sports, the biggest stars are always paid the most, right?
Right.
I know most chefs that I know that have worked in 3 Michelin star kitchens, they're not earning that much money. And right, so it's quite a funny thing where an industry that it's so proud of that, the high achievement type of thing, but it's not rewarded by it. And I think that's one of the main things that has to change, which is the systems of rewards inside the industry. And I think that slowly we're getting there.
Yeah, it's ironic. It's ironic we don't connect the success to monetary gains, and it's very ironic. I used to think this back in the day that if you work for a Microsoft or a Google or for whatever big company, an Apple, you will be paid very well because that's the whole thing of working with a company like that. Whereas in restaurants, it's more about like, okay, now that you work for me, who's a 3 Michelin star restaurant, I'll pay you less, in fact, because you will use that for your benefit in the future. And that's a very stupid argument. It has worked so far, but I think it's high time that it's stopping to work now. And this is where we need this change, right?
I think so too. I think it works so far. Here's where those type of arguments is where the toxicity of restaurants and the manipulation of restaurants, especially in the high end
Mm-hmm.
area of things, starts really showing in a way, right? Because it's
Sure.
that, no, you're cool because you're working for me. Let's not give
Exactly. Yeah.
mistaken here. Right?
Yeah.
But again, I think the trend, it's slowly changing.
Definitely. Now you can see it very evidently, and it's I would say it's a lot of credit for that is to the younger generations who are, I would say, calling out things much earlier. They're very vocal about their opinions. They're asking for what they deserve, rather than the generation which was just about, okay, my peers have had it tough, so I have to have it tough as well. I feel this new generation who's is kind of looked as a very weak generation is the one who's actually more emotional aware and more aware about what they want and what's the cost of things and what they deserve for. I feel them voicing it is good for all of us because it's gonna somehow question the whole system, and that's where I feel changes, all sort of changes in all systems come from people questioning it. And that's where my final question for you, Yago, is because a lot of my listeners are people who are young, or not necessarily young, but young in the sense of the idea of them having a voice outside restaurants, kitchens, and having different careers for themselves, careers that align with their values, align with the way of life they want to have. They are possibly listening to this conversation that we are having, right? So I bet they feel that something is off, but they don't really know what, and they don't know where to look for. And I feel entrepreneurs like yourself are the best people to give an opinion or advice on where you can look for potential ideas, problems, things to work on. So what you would say a young chef currently in their restaurant environment working in a kitchen should pay attention to have this potential idea in the future?
I mean, I think it's very cliche, but I think it's
Yeah.
very important. Be the change that you want to see. Like, it's very cool to want to change the world, and we all want to change the world, right? Especially we're chefs, we have big egos. Let's not kid
Yeah.
ourselves. But it starts first within you. Like, first, you as a chef, you as a person have to decide where you want to go, what you want to be, or what you want to do, right? And what impact you want to have. And all impacts are worthy. Like it's not that someone's better because they decide to do something that's big, and some other one tries to help a smaller community. Both impacts are equally worthy, in my opinion. And it's important to first understand those sort of personal objectives and then learn. Especially if I'm very young. I'm only 24, and I
Mhm.
have a lot to learn still. And I've definitely perhaps jumped a few steps sometimes. But I think the most important thing is to learn, to get your ideas very straight, understand once you have your goals very clear and very set, understand what are the skills, the needs that you have to accomplish those goals, and just chase those experiences because they're tough for sure, but they're fun, and it really builds a tough skin on you, and it really helps you learn the good and the bad, because sometimes humans are short-sighted and we take just few examples and think that the whole thing is opaque just cause. But there's a lot of places, and it's as important to learn from the bad experiences as it is from the good experiences,
Definitely.
and then start sort of building that own little path of yours. And it takes time, it takes a lot of work, I would say, but if you've, let's say, trained enough, once the opportunity passes your way, you'll do the jump
Yeah.
with no issue. You
Yeah.
just be
It's
ready to jump.
exactly when it's obvious, it's obvious. I think that's clearly what I believe as well. So thank you so much for sharing your time, Yago. I feel this conversation is important and it matters because it's not just about chefs changing, because a lot of conversations that I see around are about how chefs need to upskill, how they need to change, how they need to prepare for the future. But it's about the conversation we've had is about the systems that are changing around the chefs and what kind of a future lies for them over there. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, thanks for taking time to be on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and well, big hug.
If you're listening and this one made you question something, follow the podcast, rate it, or share it with somebody who needs to hear this. Because sometimes the problem isn't you, it's the system you're working in. I'll see you all in the next episode.